I'm Hunter Beast, and I'd like to talk to you about Bitcoin's quantum security. So you might have heard about quantum computing and how Bitcoin might be vulnerable to quantum computer. It poses a risk to Bitcoin because there's two ways that it poses a risk to Bitcoin. One is through mining, but mining is actually pretty impractical to do with quantum computers right now. Actually, just about everything is impractical to do with current quantum computers. But what's even more low-hanging fruit are signatures. One thing that you can do with a quantum computer that is probably the lowest hanging fruit, like kind of like the one of the more viable things you can do with a quantum computer right now, is factor number. And this is using an algorithm called Shor's algorithm. And what Shor's algorithm does is it dramatically speeds up the capability for a quantum computer that is potentially slightly larger than what we have commercially available right now to be able to potentially derive, say, a private key from a public key. Public key you can think of being a very large number, 256 bits, in fact, and the elliptic curve behind that is called SecP256K1. That's used in Bitcoin. So when you have a public key that's exposed, a quantum computer could potentially derive the private key from it if it was powerful enough. When are keys exposed in the Bitcoin blockchain? So the first would be early addresses, because they're called P2PK, or pay to public key, and they encoded an entire 65 bytes public key plus like a couple opcodes to check it, and that is the entire encoding of the entire public key, available on the blockchain for all time. Also, if you use an address, if you use an address to receive Bitcoin, and you spend from it, and then you use that again to receive more Bitcoin, then what you've essentially done with your first transaction is you've revealed your public key whenever you go to the mempool. In particular, all mempool transactions except for the one I'm about to propose is vulnerable to this kind of attack. And also, taproot addresses, it's worth noting, is a 32-byte X-only public key. This is still just as vulnerable as a 65-byte public key to quantum computers. Now, Shor's algorithm, it's actually, like right now, it's pretty weak. Like people are like somewhat concerned about it, but it is making progress. What's interesting is that the results that come back from it are essentially kind of random looking. Like that chart on the right is like about the best it can do, and that this the circuit kind of in the background there is is only good for factoring a number up to the number 15. So one question you might have is, how soon might this be like an actual legitimate concern? And the answer to that is difficult to provide because I'm not clairvoyant, but what we can do is we can survey what's out there. And right now there's a commercially available piece of hardware called the Quantum System 2. It is capable of 133 qubits per QPU, and it can scale to many more qubits depending on however many systems you're capable of connecting. And there's a number of different companies working on this as well. There's billions of dollars being thrown at this problem, and as you can imagine, with early Bitcoins being sort of a potential incentive, there might even be more companies that'll be coming in and trying to see if there's any opportunities there. And this is actually an example. So this is the quantum system too. This is what it looks like. It's kind of imposing. You probably haven't seen a quantum computer. This is essentially what it looks like. It has a dilution refrigerator inside of it. It cools to colder than deep space, and it isolates the chips from RF and radio frequency radiation, thermal radiation, all sorts of like vibration and things like that. And this is on the inside, they have these like coiled wires because it's supposed to contract the metal because it gets so cold. And you can see the chip on the bottom there. So Peter Woolley, you might have heard of him. He says that sufficiently powerful quantum computers are hypothetical, and if they happen, there will be a long series of incremental breakthroughs. And what we've seen since he's posted this tweet in 2019 is a long series of incremental breakthroughs, and it's potential that we'll see many more. It's very likely. And so there's actually like somebody has actually put thought into what a quantum emergency might look like, how this order will occur, and there's it really just depends on the level of risk people are perceiving, and of course there are actions we can take to mitigate against that. Additionally, if you want to know the government's timeline for when they want to be prepared for quantum computing, it's around 2029 to 2033, as you can see here. One thing to know is that about 4 million there are about 4 million public keys on the chain. Well, actually, no, I should rephrase that. There are about 4 million Bitcoin that have their public keys exposed. And that's about 20% of the supply. This is according to a Deloitte report from 2020. And we've also adjusted for the additional supply since then. So what do we do? Well, we introduced post-quantum cryptography to Bitcoin. And right now, we're using SecP 256K1. And we have two implementations of a signature algorithm, ECDSA and Schnorr. They have their different byte sizes, but to give you kind of a comparison to some of the most modern post-quantum cryptography, and I'm talking about like this is like from just last year, SkiSign, which is considered kind of the state of the art for quantum computing, and it's not also fully verified that it is secure, is a size of about 335 bytes, and that's for the least secure version of it. And then there's also another one that's been approved by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that is Falcon, and it has public key and signature pairs that are about less than 4 kilobytes in size. But compare that to Schnorr, which is like 32-byte public key and a 64-byte signature. We really do have this luxury of having elliptic curve cryptography still secure because it is so much more expensive to sign and provide public keys for any kind of transactions you might do using post-quantum cryptography. I represent an organization called Surmount Systems, and we have been working on a series of BIPs, P2QRH being one of them. This is for quantum-resistant addresses, and I'll go into that BIP shortly. There's also 2 other BIPs that we're planning on. QuBit activation, which we're thinking very hard about, which is the name that we've chosen for our soft fork. And also quantum secure addresses, which is a much further possibility for us to investigate. But ideally, we use quantum computers or something like them to secure, to sign Bitcoin transactions, and then you can verify them classically. And we were actually, so I've actually created a BIP and submitted it to the BIPs repo, Bitcoin BIPs. And it was covered in Bitcoin Uptake newsletter 307 if you're curious. There's also some audio version of some discussion around it. If you so write down 307 if you know bitcoinuptake.org. And then we're at Surmount Systems, we're actually working on a indexer we call Gabriel. And it essentially keeps track of what we call Satoshi Shield. And so there's essentially 1 million Bitcoin that were mined by somebody who looked a lot like Satoshi or could have been Satoshi, according to what's called the Patoshi pattern. If you ever want to look that up, it's a very interesting story, and we'll see. But what we're doing is we want to track how many pay-to-public key coins are out there and whether they've been spent or not. And it's kind of like not only just an early warning system against potential compromise of what's called the elliptic curve discrete log problem, but which is what secures elliptic curve cryptography. But it also is a sort of shield against potential theft against what you could probably just call plebs, because each address from early Bitcoin mining rewards were 50 Bitcoin each. And what's interesting is early Bitcoin Core clients, even like 0.1, supported addresses that started with 1. They were hashed to public key hash, but it defaulted to, when mining, pay to public key, which is a very interesting choice, design choice, if it was a choice, for the default version of Bitcoin. So people who might have forgotten or lost their keys or something, they also sort of contribute this this shield to the shield that helps anybody with less than 50 Bitcoin in their address to be sort of at least crypto-economically incentivized to not worry so much during a quantum emergency, and that allows you to transfer your wealth to P2 quantum-resistant hash address type. And this is an incomplete set of results, but it gives you kind of an idea of where things are with P2 public key. It's probably really tiny, but what it leveled off at is around 2 million P2 public key coins early on. And that's those are essentially the preliminary results from the Gabriel indexer, where we implemented the capability to read block.dat files and go through them and see if they've been spent, what coins have been spent. Now, to get further into P2QRH, because this is a Bitcoin workshop, plenty of Bitcoiners here understand UTXOs and how they're accounted for. And so I want to go a little deeper into that, if we have the time. And we're with QuBit, we want to introduce 4 signature algorithms. And this is a sort of redundancy. in case one of them is compromised. And we also want to give people the option of having, these other quantum algorithms that are smaller in size, like SkiSign, which is more experimental. It's newer, but it's also a lot cheaper. And so this gives Bitcoin users a lot of choice. It does complicate the lives of wallet devs and just most devs, really, because you're supporting not just one, but a total of 5 different signature algorithms. And you might even say 6 if you're including a distinction between ECDSA and Schnorr signatures. And so but the good news is that this is a soft fork. It's just a new address type for people to opt into. It would be essentially an improvement on Taproot. It might not be fully compatible with all Taproot programs, and we'll go into that in a bit, but basically we're keeping signature public key pairs in a separate field in the transaction we call the attestation. And this attestation would, you can see on the lower left there, that's essentially how a transaction is made up. You have the version, the marker, the flag, which in SegWit v1 is 01, and right now we set the flag in P2QRH to 03. And alongside the witness, we have a separate field called the attestation that we want to include only valid signatures that are valid for spending those inputs, and then provide a 16x discount to that because the signature sizes are so much larger for post-quantum cryptography. There will need to be a sort of discount in order to include the same amount of transactions or similar amount of transactions per block. And this will effectively increase the chain growth rate, but it is not necessarily an increase in what we consider the block size, because it's kept at 1 million bytes. It's just some of these bytes are discounted. Not all bytes are fungible, apparently. And so this is kind of the reasoning behind the 16x. Value is that we we thought it was a good balance between all the stakeholders. So we have to kind of convince, this is relevant to one of the talks earlier today, but we have to convince a lot of people that this is a thing that needs to be done for Bitcoin. And we've thought a lot about, individual node runners who will be probably the most impacted by this because of the increase in chain size and chain growth rate. We kept it at 16 instead of putting it to something absurd like 128, right? And so we could have made Bitcoin transactions much cheaper and this post-quantum cryptography almost free, but we didn't because it's important that this is priced in a fee market in a way that's at least appropriate but balanced. And not everybody's going to be happy with these compromises, but that's the whole point of compromises. Not everybody's happy, but it's good enough to keep Bitcoin secure. And we also have to convince enthusiasts, investors, all these other people, and come up with a soft fork and build utilities and tools for services, wallets, and layers. And also, a new development since, say, the SegWit era is that miners can now pick their own block templates, individual miners. And so if they find the magical nonce that allows them to achieve the difficulty required to mining a block, they will be able to potentially decide whether they want to support this in any kind of activation scenario at a level that ordinarily mining pools were kept at. And so this essentially democratizes in many ways the activation of a soft fork, and it also makes it so that we have to convince even more people to adopt P2Q/H. So if you think that any of that work is valuable, we are working really hard, and we'd love to come to more conferences like this. If you'd like to go to surmount.systems, you can find some payment links and contribution links for Bolt 12 and for silent payments. We support both of those for privacy purposes, and because we take privacy pretty seriously. And also, we're on X if you want to follow us. And we considered supporting Nostr. I love Nostr a lot, but the problem with Nostr is it's all secured by public keys. And so you can imagine why we made that decision. So that's about everything. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a
3 minutes per question.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Check. I have a couple friends in AI in the Netherlands that have been doing large language models for 15 years, and what they said about ChatGPT was not that it wasn't possible, but when would somebody be able to harness that amount of hardware and that amount of speed, and it was 10 years earlier than they thought. It was shocked the whole AI community. I don't understand this at all. Why can't the same thing happen here with quantum?
There are so many unknown unknowns that I couldn't tell you that it couldn't happen earlier. And so what I would say is that we should take this existential threat to Bitcoin very seriously, and that if we want this to become the money that the world uses, for international trade, and we want to have some kind of governments involved or whatever, big financial institutions, this is something that they're going to want to be aware of and mitigating against, because the government already is. And so for Bitcoin to be taken seriously and for people to have trust in it for the foreseeable future, we're going to need a soft fork like P2Q/H and QuBit. Good question, thank you.
So SecP 256K1 has a Schnorr implementation, which is aggregable. Are any of those proposed, are they aggregable or are they not?
So actually in the BIP, I specified that we would include only one Schnorr signature, because there's the possibility that if quantum computers are broken, or like ECDLP is broken, then people can include arbitrary data in the attestation and receive that 16x discount, which is something that we would like to avoid. And so we only allow for one Schnorr signature, and that's because Schnorr signatures and public keys can be aggregated, and so that will be able to support multi-sig applications.
Sorry, I thought it was the same question, but.
Yeah, so my question is, I think maybe what you were actually asking, which is, are any of those quantum schemes able to aggregate multiple signatures into one?
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Yeah.
Oh, good point. Yeah, so there's a couple reasons why we still want to support SecP 256K1. One is so that we can have at least some of this functionality. It might not necessarily be as secure as if it was implemented in these algorithms, but it's not quite clear if we can have similar things like ECDH and like key tweaking and all the different things that we get to do with SecP 256K1, and of course signature aggregation, right? And so it's not quite clear, and so we're trying to take this as like a more naive approach to including these signature algorithms just for signing and key generation. And then we're using Schnorr, we're building on top of Schnorr for that to actually be functional. And we also support Schnorr because it is sort of like this hybrid cryptography approach where we allow, we don't want to ever reduce the security assumptions of Bitcoin. We want to just augment them and not replace them, which might possibly reduce the security from a vulnerability standpoint if there is a vulnerability found in any of these other signature algorithms that are used.
Yeah, two small questions. If I understand this correctly, basically all the Satoshi coins at some point will get hacked either way with quantum computing. So there's a massive incentive basically behind this now, right? Is there anything you can do about that? Like, you probably have thought about it more. I would assume no, but maybe you have. And then second is, the SQI sign is like a very recent proposal, if I understand. Like, aren't there like more older, more proven algorithms more available or not?
Yeah, well, to answer your last question first, Sphinx or SLHDSA has been in the works since 2015 or so, or maybe even earlier, 2010. I think it was approved in 2015 or something like that. But there's also Winterschnitt signatures and Lampert signatures, which are also much older. Lampert signatures date back to 1977. And so the problem with Lampert signatures, and we actually go into this in the BIP, and we compare just about every post-quantum cryptography algorithm we could find. And we found that, Lampert signatures are at least 64 kilobytes in size. And then, there's also the public key. And so they're not as practical as these more modern implementations, though they might be more secure necessarily. It depends. It really does depend.
Yeah, more time over.
Yeah.
And the first question?
Of
Satoshi's coins? Yeah, Satoshi's coins.
Yeah.
They're going to get hacked either way.
Yeah. So if we were to prevent people from spending their coins, because like we've already seen, early coins move potentially in response to this potential threat that people are talking about. If we were to prevent them from moving their coins, this could be a hard fork scenario, and that's something that we would like to avoid just any controversy in. We want to just be very focused on what we do in Bitcoin, and something more ambitious can follow on later if it becomes, a larger concern. But we just want to, introducing a new address type and also introducing an attestation discount would be so difficult already. I don't want to complicate it more with even more ambitious and broad-ranging solutions to this problem.
I would love to keep going with questions, but we got to keep on a time schedule. Hunter, thank you so much. This is fascinating.